Okay, so let's talk about this painting, Lumbering. Lumbering was one of 3 pieces that I started in the intuitive process workshop that I filmed with Kara Bullock. And just as a sort of background on this piece, I had essentially 4 days to create 3 paintings, bringing them from start to finish during the filming process of the workshop. Now, lumbering happened to be the painting that required the most time to mature. And that could be because I was feeling a lot of external pressure and perhaps even trying to force her to become something that she wasn't ready to be. I decided that I was going to give her the gift of time, and this was where the painting landed at the end of the filming process. And this is where she landed after about a month's worth of time back in my home studio. So this particular video is going to take you through all of the steps from the stopping point or the pause that I imposed on lumbering at the commencement of the filming or the end of the filming process, and what I consider to be the finished piece, which is the image that you see on the right. So let's step into all of the different stages that lumbering went through so that you can have a deeper insight as to how she progressed. As a bit of background, this is a 24 by 30 inch acrylic on a flat panel. And my starting point with this piece was, well, the idea behind her is marrying the bear with the California landscape. And my starting point was beginning on a plain or naked panel with the approach of building a value-centric design. And you can really see that here. You can see that this painting is essentially 2 values at this point. It's mid values, which are highly saturated colors, and the darkest darks, which make up the tree trunk, some of the bear's face on the right, and the branch work on the left-hand side. I really love the dynamism of this concept and the idea of the bear being rooted in the lower edge of the painting. But I wasn't really clear on where she was going or what her storyline actually was. And I struggled with that and spent a lot of time playing with the nuance inside the design aspect and the smaller marks inside the design, like the sky holes in the tree branches and those leaf shapes over on the left-hand side, and kind of allowed myself to get distracted by those smaller shapes or all of those edges. And I know personally that working from a design starting point, or not working from a value-based starting point, is a challenge for me. That's way out of my comfort zone. And I'm used to starting up in a more general to specific fashion and pulling or crisping those edges out at the very end. So this was a space that I was really uncomfortable in, which was good because that's how we learn and grow. But it also was a space that I really didn't have a whole lot of experience navigating myself out of, and I wasn't really clear where to go next. When this happens, I have to step back and give myself and the painting the gift of time and a little bit of distance and some fresh eyes so that I can go back into it and see or plug into her possibilities. Conveniently, she got boxed up and shipped from California back to Michigan, and I had the gift of about 10 days where I just didn't even look at her or think about her and just tried to focus on other problems. Sometimes distracting myself or allowing my brain to engage with a totally different type of problem solving is also a great strategy for a reset. One of the things that I did do when I brought her back to the easel was use the app Notinizer to study her in both a 2 value, a white and dark value design, as well as a 3 value design. And I love to do this for a couple of reasons. Number one, I want my two value design to be dynamic and engaging and interesting. And I want my three value design to sort of show me the form itself, but also give me space to create more abstracted, ambiguous passages. And I can see right away when I look at these two images from Notanizer, the images or the design is flat, it's very heavy, it feels predictable. I feel like there is some interesting energy happening from the lower left to the upper right that contradicts the energy of the tree, which creates a different diagonal, but it's too heavy and it swallows the piece up. I also didn't feel like there was a whole lot of pictorial space in this, meaning the viewer didn't get to travel into the painting at all. All the marks were right there directly on the surface, and that limits the viewer's ability to move through the space and engage with the piece in different ways. So right away, I knew that I needed to find her form and place it inside a believable space. So putting the painting on my easel and with a piece of plain sidewalk chalk in my hand, I redrew the bear. Now, it would be tempting to go back to initial drawings or photos of the painting in an earlier stage, but it's important to me that my lines when I redraw are not a replication of what's already been done before, but happen in response to what's going on the surface. So I can pay attention to directional brushwork, other little subtle edges, or gentle shifts in the color, and use that to nudge or adjust my line work to better improve the piece. So I'm not even forcing, I'm responding. This is the response part of the process. And you can see what happened after I did that and I blocked out that negative space so that I was bringing a lighter value into that upper left corner and carried that all the way across and sort of unified the negative space behind the shape of the bear. All of a sudden, she is coming towards the viewer, and it really shifts the energy of the piece. It gives the viewer the opportunity to imagine or allow their brain to move into the painting and through the space around the bear. Now, right now, I feel like a couple of things are happening because of this. There is this fantastic sunrise that's happening at the top of her head, and I really love that. And I feel like the bear herself has become a pretty incredible vessel with that bright blue sky and the sky holes in her legs. And I really love the colors and all that's happening here. But I can also see that my values are too dark. I've pushed them too dark. Just because I can paint that darkest dark based on the colors that are laid out on my palette doesn't mean I have to push it all the way there. And so much acreage on this particular painting is set into that darkest dark space, and I need more nuance in that. So I have to correct that. Also, all of my edges are really crisp, and really hard edges all the time never give the viewer's eye a place to stop and rest. So I need to shift that and create some more differences in my edges. And I love the color. I love all the color that's here, but it's all saturated. It is too loud. It is screaming at the viewer. And just like my realization with my values all being too strong and harsh without variance, I need to do the same thing with my color and introduce some less saturated, more harmonic color into these shapes and spaces to improve the piece. The second I begin to put some of these action items into play on the painting, it shifts remarkably. So you can see here the bottom trunk area, I've built some nuance in, I've made it softer, gentler. I've even added a sort of misty ground into the branches, the brushwork that sits inside the apex of the trunk where it splits. This is a really beautiful, beautiful addition to the spatial perception, or the space that's depicted in the painting. And it also allows for a deeper sense of space inside or in between those tree branches than what is depicted in the rest of the painting. So there's an interesting sort of tension that is happening between the right and left hand side that have so much color in them, and that middle aspect that's been grayed down or fogged back. You'll also notice that as much as I love that little rabbit in between the nook of the branches, I let her go because she wasn't part of this particular story. This bear's story is about approaching the viewer and showing the viewer how to be connected with their environment, and that rabbit was just not part of the story, so she needed to go. She's a great idea, but I will table her for another piece. So I'm beginning to realize that values are a key part of understanding and steering the direction of this piece. So after this painting session, I bring the images back into Notanizer and I spend some time studying them. So what you see here on the left is my 2-value mock-up of the painting, and on the right is a 3-value one. And already there's so much more movement in here. The addition of, or allowing more acreage to my lightest lights has really shifted the movement in the painting. So really dark, heavy shadows create a sense of solidity and a static placement, whereas lighter values give the opportunity for things to move and transition throughout the space. So I know that my shifts, or my decision to change the negative space in the painting, was a really good one, because this is infusing the piece with that movement and allowing the bear to come forward in a soft, gentle way. But I also want to talk a little bit about how I happen to use, or why I like to use, a 3-value mock-up as well. So when I am painting, I like to think of my value scale in 5 steps. I have my lightest lights, my darkest darks, and my midtones. And then in between my lightest lights and my midtones, I have mid-lights. And in between my midtones and my darkest darks, I have mid-darks. So reducing my design into my lightest lights, my midtones, and my darkest darks already tells me, or identifies for me, where on the surface my nuanced high key marks are going to be. Those are going to be my lightest lights. My nuanced shadow work is going to be my darkest darks. And my bold saturated color sits in the middle. That's going to be the midtones. So this is the significance of a 3-value design, or 3-value mock-up in my mind. This is why I utilize that at multiple stages during a painting's progression. But real quickly, what I do want to show you is the 2-value difference from where we started out and where we are right now. And I think it's pretty obvious that you can see there's a different sort of energy. There's a different feel altogether. The painting is a bit more approachable. It's not as foreboding. That center area where the branch work comes up to kiss the bear shape is a bit more exciting. It's not as abrupt. And the fusion of the tree shapes, the branch work, the lower left corner, and the bear itself are a lot more interesting than how the piece originally, or how the piece sat when we first started working on it. But I still wasn't really sure where I needed to go with this. And I let her sit for a couple of days, and nothing came to mind, nothing turned up. And I decided that I was going to try a totally different approach. I grabbed a giant canvas, 36 by 48 inches. So The one we're working on, lumbering, is 24 by 30, just so you have an idea of the difference in scale between the two. I grabbed this older painting and using lumbering as a starting point and a piece of vine charcoal, I sketched my composition from lumbering over top of this larger painting. And then I just began to work over top of it. You know, there are things that happen in my mind. It totally shifts when I scale up my marks and when I give myself a fresh perspective to problem solve from. So, you know, I really just considered the larger painting as an initial block in. And I do plan on ultimately finishing her and allowing her to become a piece in and of her own. But the process of working on her and having the conversation with the design as it transferred from lumbering onto this new piece, and the conversation of that design with what was underneath or already painted on the canvas, was really great distraction. It gave me a whole new set of problems to solve as I thought about the energy of the tree, how it's anchored to the bottom edge, how it's reaching, how the bear is seemingly growing from the tree, and also what happened during the process. Those red and yellow marks in the piece on the right, those were already there on the painting when I drew the bear down. So that conversation that happened between what I was adding to the surface already, it enabled me to see, when I looked at lumbering, how distracting those hard edges around her face were. I loved the idea of having that insert of branches and that hard edge lead the viewer right into her face. Is a good idea, but the execution of it just wasn't serving the whole painting because I had all these hard edges in the bottom half, and they began to compete with each other, and you didn't see the bear. So having the opportunity to start another painting in a different scale with a different starting point, no less, gave me the opportunity to see that my problem was really that upper right quadrant and all around her face, where there's all these hard edges and nothing soft and nothing nuanced and nothing really surprising. Those roses or daisies that are nestled into her cheek are just such a delightful, unexpected diversion from how one would expect a tree to branch out, particularly with the foliage over on the left-hand side. We wouldn't expect to see florals or blooms on a tree that has just leaves on it on the other side. So this reminded me of how important surprises are, and that I hadn't really allowed any surprises to come in. In lumbering, I was sort of still trying to force her to be a properly articulated bear with the branch work, that collision of the branch work sort of slapped over half of her head. And I really wasn't thinking about her as being integrated or responding or coming out of the tree in any way. It was just the branch work, the bear, the tree, and no sort of transitions or bridges between all of those. So soon as I realized that, I knew that her face had to go. And I needed to completely repaint that quadrant. This sort of a decision can be pretty scary to actually execute. And it's a great sort of example of how you should not let anything in your painting get too precious. The fact that I'm going to paint over her face has nothing to do with how I rendered it already. And it has everything to do with the fact that every inch of the surface of this painting has to serve the same end result. And they simply weren't working that way. Knowing that the problem was the face and all those hard edges, I just eliminated them. I extended a very soft transition from the blue sky behind the branch work across the entirety of that upper right quadrant and really gave myself almost a fresh new slate to put that face down on. And I could not believe how beautiful, how much this painting changed the second that I did that. You know, it was both terrifying and also a little bit invigorating. So then I went back into that space once the paint had dried with a piece of vine charcoal, and I very carefully redrew, using a contour drawing approach, redrew the facial structure of her head. I was thinking about the positioning of the bear's face and her eyes. I really wanted her gaze to be direct at the viewer. I lifted her nose just a little bit and shifted her eyes quite a bit from how I had them originally drawn. And I also moved her ear. These were all things that sort of happened intuitively as I began to reconstruct the facial features. I realized, because I didn't have that history of all the marks underneath of it and all those hard edges, I realized that initial drawing errors were holding me back, or all of those hard edges were holding me back. So I also sort of began to think about that lower left quadrant and how I was going to bring that to fruition. You may notice that I painted that out. As much as I loved what was going on down there, it was too demanding and it needed to be pushed back. So just like I pushed that whole face structure back, I also let the elements that I had painted in that lower quadrant go back. And in the process of doing that, I discovered that there was such a beautiful horizon line almost in the middle of the painting, that the painting had the bottom of it feels like it's a tree trunk, the top of it feels like it's the foliage, and that was a really nice awakening for this piece. The other thing that I noticed at this stage was how the upper quadrant, or the top half of the bear, doesn't perfectly align with the tree trunk or the branches, and I really liked that. So I went into the left-hand side and I got rid of some of the hard marks that bridged the upper and lower portion of the painting, and softened that by pulling some of the sky down into the lower quadrant and adding leaves, and also building similar branch type shapes on the left, but different. So, you know, again, introducing differences into the piece so that the viewer is rewarded when they continue to look at it. They're going to discover more and more nuance or subtlety and how the design is read the more time that they spend with it. What I also did was played up my face with some softer edges. I carved the gaze in. You know, it was really hard for me. Originally, I painted the eyes in on this piece pretty early on, and then I took them out because it didn't feel alive. And the painting was starting to feel alive now, and this is unusual for me in not putting the eyes in until this late in the game. But here you have a close-up look at those eyes and what they, you know, the life, the depth that's in them. And you can also really see and appreciate how interesting it is to view both the sculpted or modeled form of the bear's muzzle in alignment or in conjunction with just the line work over that sky-like coloring for the rest of her head. It's really, really engaging and fascinating to look at. So isn't it fascinating the differences that we just stepped through on this particular painting? She became something more fully, more naturally, more evocatively unique just via the softening of the edges, the condensing or compression of the values, restricting my color and introducing some really lovely color harmony and nuance instead of all this loud, bold, in your face sort of color. And also sort of paying attention to the energy, the gesture of the way she steps forward or is moving towards the viewer, softening that allowed it to become sort of a stronger singular gesture than the really dark, hard way that I initially depicted it. And I also really love how this tree became less of an oak tree and more of a banyan tree. And if you're familiar with banyan trees, they sort of drop roots from multiple sections of the branches themselves. So the tree is not just anchored to the ground with a singular trunk, but actually has all these beautiful veins and limbs that connect it to the earth. And that was this piece's message, right? Our connection to our environment and being rooted and moving toward the thing that is asking us for its attention. So here you have lumbering, a 24 by 30 inch acrylic painting on flat panel. I am so pleased with where she landed, despite all of the challenges and the ways that she pushed and prodded me to really go deep and be patient. And I'm very grateful to you for sticking around and watching the video. Thanks so much for being here.